The Monarch's Ultimatum. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. The Twins. The great hall of the twins, all dim and foul with dampness and the stench of old meat, their lord sprawling in his chair, hunched up like a vulture, a parchment clutched in his wrinkled hand, which he waved as he read from it in a wheezing voice that was barely audible. The Shadow Monarch is coming for Westeros. Bend the knee or be my eternal loyal servants. He let out a choked cackle, slapping a hand down on the armrest of his chair. Ha! What nonsense is this? Some bloody fool thinks he can threaten me. Me. He shrilled the voice high and shook the letter in the air. I've lived through 6 kings and I'll outlive this bloody fool too. He wants me to bend the knee. The man scoffed. The only thing I bend is my wives over there. Those in the hall that were gathered of the phrase laughed nervously, though some looked uncomfortable. What is this, Shadow Monarch, anyway? One of his sons muttered. Some trickster from the east. What can a bloody shadow do, haha? Another laughed. Walder Frey snarled, spat upon the ground, crumpled the letter in his hand into a ball. Tell whoever sent this that I'll bend my ass before I bend my knee. He had barely cast the parchment aside before the torches in the hall began to dance, wild. Laughter and murmurs died as an unnatural chill swept over the room. And then, from the darkest corner, it emerged. A shadow soldier moved forward, liquid darkness twisting into the form of a man. Its eyes shone like eerie blue lanterns. The phrase scrambled, some drawing swords, others frozen in terror. What is this? Walder Frey shrieked, grasping for the arms of his chair. Kill it. His sons leapt forward with their swords, but the shadow moved like mist, evading their blades. One after another they fell, their throats were slit, their chests stabbed all before they could even think of reaching for their swords. Walder tried to rise, his legs shaking, but the shadow was upon him. It reached out, a cold hand wrapping around his withered throat. His breath hitched, his face contorting in terror. No, wait. He gasped, his voice cracking. The grip of the shadow tightened. A sickening crunch echoed through the hall. Walder Frey slumped lifelessly in his chair, eyes wide in frozen shock. His mocking laughter was silenced forever. The shadow melted away as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving only stunned silence in its wake. What? What in the name of the 7 just happened? One of the remaining Freys whispered. Nobody had an answer. Harrenhal. Tywin Lannister sat at the long table in the great hall of Harrenhal, his sharp golden eyes scanning the parchment before him. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows across his face, but his expression remained unreadable. Kevan Lannister, seated across from him, cleared his throat. Is it another report from the Riverlands? Tywin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, rereading the letter. Then, in a measured tone, he spoke. Tywin Lannister, you might already be informed, and for that, I will not waste words. He tapped a finger against the paper. When the time comes, when I take these realms, I would want a powerful man such as yourself as my hand. I am not cut out for politics, but I have power that the realms will soon witness. Silence hung over the room. Kevan furrowed his brow. A bold claim. A foolish one, Tywin corrected, setting the letter down. Whoever this Shadow Monarch is, he speaks as if his conquest of Westeros is inevitable. He reached for his wine, swirling it in his goblet. A delusion shared by many before him. Kevan nodded but hesitated. You don't seem surprised by this. Tywin's lips twitched slightly, a ghost of a smirk. Because I'm not. The rumors out of the north have been interesting. Theon Greyjoy took Winterfell, yet was driven out by something neither Stark nor Greyjoy. And the old letter that we received spoke of something similar. I believe it's the same man. He paused, his fingers tapping the wooden table. And now, I receive a letter from a supposed conqueror who does not seek my death, but my service. Kevan's eyes narrowed. And what do you intend to do? Tywin exhaled through his nose, setting the goblet down. That depends. He looked at the letter again, his gaze lingering on one particular line. I would want a powerful man such as yourself as my hand. It was not a demand. It was an offer. Tywin's mind raced, weighing the possibilities. Whoever this Shadow Monarch was, he was not an ordinary fool. Most would seek to destroy House Lannister, not recruit him. That meant one thing, whoever sent this letter knew exactly how Westeros worked. He is no king, Tywin finally said. But he is not a fool either that I can tell. And that is what makes him dangerous. Kevin looked at him, awaiting further orders. Tywin steepled his fingers and smirked. Let's see what happens next. King's Landing. The small council chamber ever full of tension, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shadows against the stone walls. At the head of the table, Tyrion Lannister, acting hand of the king, sipped his wine and pinched the bridge of his nose as Varys, the spider, read aloud from the latest Raven's letter. To the rulers of Westeros, Varys began, his smooth voice carrying a hint of amusement. The true lord of the Seven Kingdoms is coming, and it is neither a Stark nor any of the petty 5 kings. Tell your false king this, the Shadow Monarch is coming for you. Bend the knee, or become my eternal loyal servants. The room fell silent for a brief moment before Joffrey Baratheon burst into laughter, an obnoxious, high-pitched cackle that grated on everyone's nerves. What kind of fool wrote this? Joffrey sneered, slamming a golden goblet onto the table. Some peasant thinks he can make demands of his king his king. He turned to Cersei, expecting her agreement. Mother, shall I have this fool flayed alive when he dares show his face? Cersei Lannister barely glanced at her son, swirling her own goblet with mild interest. Another pretender. What else is new, shall we call this the 6th king now? I must admit, Littlefinger chimed in, his smirk barely concealed, Shadow Monarch, is a more creative title than, King in the North, or, the Usurper's Dog. He chuckled, tapping his fingers against the table. But it's all the same. Someone with delusions of grandeur, making threats he cannot enforce. Indeed, Varys agreed, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. Yet, it is curious that Maester Luwin, a man known for his wisdom, would send such a message on behalf of someone. Either he has lost his mind, or he has seen something. Oh, please. Joffrey scoffed, kicking his feet up on the table with all the arrogance of a boy who had never fought a day in his life. These old fools are easily swayed by superstition. Shadow Monarch, ha. Let him come. I'll have his head on a spike before he can crawl out of whatever hole he came from. Tyrion, however, remained silent. Unlike the others, he wasn't so quick to dismiss the letter. His sharp mind turned over the words carefully, dissecting their intent. Bend the knee, or become my eternal loyal servants, that part unsettled him. It did not sound like mere conquest, it sounded absolute. He opened his mouth to speak, to raise a word of caution. And then the torches in the chamber flickered violently, casting wild shadows across the walls. A chill swept through the room. The air turned heavy, pressing against their chests like an unseen force. Then, it appeared. A shadow soldier stepped forward from the darkest corner of the chamber, its form shifting like liquid midnight. Its eyes, 2 burning embers, locked onto the table of the most powerful people in the realm. The guards at the doors reacted first, drawing swords and stepping forward, but the creature barely acknowledged them. Instead, it moved fast, too fast, gliding toward the table without a sound. Joffrey shrieked, stumbling out of his chair. Kill it! Kill it! The Kingsguard surged forward, their blades slashing through the air, but they cut through nothing. The shadow moved like smoke, slipping between their attacks effortlessly. What sorcery is this? Cersei gasped, rising from her seat, her face pale with fear. Tyrion stood frozen, his mind racing, trying to comprehend what was happening. The shadow ignored them all. It had one target. Joffrey screamed, scrambling backward as the shadow lunged at him. The boy king fell over his own feet, his golden crown tumbling to the floor with a hollow clink. No. No, I am the king. Joffrey shrieked, his voice cracking. You can't. The shadow's hand wrapped around his throat. Joffrey gagged, clawing at the air, his eyes bulging as the life was drained from his body. The entire chamber watched in horror, frozen in place. His kicks grew weaker. His struggles turned feeble. And then, snap. His body went limp. The shadow dropped him like a discarded ragdoll. The once proud king of Westeros lay dead on the floor, his eyes staring lifelessly at the ceiling. The shadow turned its gaze on the small council as if daring any of them to move. But none did. Then, just as quickly as it came, it vanished. Silence. For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Then, finally, Cersei shattered the stillness with a scream so raw, so full of grief and rage, that the very walls of the chamber seemed to tremble. My son. She lunged forward, cradling Joffrey's lifeless body in her arms, her golden hair disheveled, her face contorted in anguish. The small council was paralyzed, their faces drained of color. Varys was stone-faced, though his hands trembled slightly. Baelish's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by something much more rare on it, unease. Tyrion swallowed hard, his mind whirling. He had seen many things in his life, but this was something else. Slowly, he looked down at the fallen letter on the table. The Shadow Monarch is coming for you. Tyrion exhaled sharply. 7 hells. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. 27 comments, 0 vote. Shadowlands Call. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. The Twins. The great hall of the twins, all dim and foul with dampness and the stench of old meat, their lord sprawling in his chair, hunched up like a vulture, a parchment clutched in his wrinkled hand, which he waved as he read from it in a wheezing voice that was barely audible. The Shadow Monarch is coming for Westeros. Bend the knee or be my eternal loyal servants. He let out a choked cackle, slapping a hand down on the armrest of his chair. Ha! What nonsense is this? Some bloody fool thinks he can threaten me. Me. He shrilled the voice high and shook the letter in the air. I've lived through 6 kings and I'll outlive this bloody fool too. He wants me to bend the knee. The man scoffed. The only thing I bend is my wives over there. Those in the hall that were gathered of the phrase laughed nervously, though some looked uncomfortable. What is this, Shadow Monarch, anyway? One of his sons muttered. Some trickster from the east. What can a bloody shadow do, haha? Another laughed. Walder Frey snarled, spat upon the ground, crumpled the letter in his hand into a ball. Tell whoever sent this that I'll bend my ass before I bend my knee. He had barely cast the parchment aside before the torches in the hall began to dance, wild. Laughter and murmurs died as an unnatural chill swept over the room. And then, from the darkest corner, it emerged. A shadow soldier moved forward, liquid darkness twisting into the form of a man. Its eyes shone like eerie blue lanterns. The phrase scrambled, some drawing swords, others frozen in terror. What is this? Walder Frey shrieked, grasping for the arms of his chair. Kill it. His sons leapt forward with their swords, but the shadow moved like mist, evading their blades. One after another they fell, their throats were slit, their chests stabbed all before they could even think of reaching for their swords. Walder tried to rise, his legs shaking, but the shadow was upon him. It reached out, a cold hand wrapping around his withered throat. His breath hitched, his face contorting in terror. No, wait. He gasped, his voice cracking. All. The grip of the shadow tightened. A sickening crunch echoed through the hall. Walder Frey slumped lifelessly in his chair, eyes wide in frozen shock. His mocking laughter was silenced forever. The shadow melted away as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving only stunned silence in its wake. What? What in the name of the 7 just happened? One of the remaining Freys whispered. Nobody had an answer. Harrenhal. Tywin Lannister sat at the long table in the great hall of Harrenhal, his sharp golden eyes scanning the parchment before him. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows across his face, but his expression remained unreadable. Kevan Lannister, seated across from him, cleared his throat. Is it another report from the Riverlands? Tywin didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back slightly, rereading the letter. Then, in a measured tone, he spoke. Tywin Lannister, you might already be informed, and for that, I will not waste words. He tapped a finger against the paper. When the time comes, when I take these realms, I would want a powerful man such as yourself as my hand. I am not cut out for politics, but I have power that the realms will soon witness. Silence hung over the room. Kevan furrowed his brow. A bold claim. A foolish one, Tywin corrected, setting the letter down. Whoever this Shadow Monarch is, he speaks as if his conquest of Westeros is inevitable. He reached for his wine, swirling it in his goblet. A delusion shared by many before him. Kevan nodded but hesitated. You don't seem surprised by this. Tywin's lips twitched slightly, a ghost of a smirk. Because I'm not. The rumors out of the north have been interesting. Theon Greyjoy took Winterfell, yet was driven out by something neither Stark nor Greyjoy. And the old letter that we received spoke of something similar. I believe it's the same man. He paused, his fingers tapping the wooden table. And now, I receive a letter from a supposed conqueror who does not seek my death, but my service. Kevin's eyes narrowed. And what do you intend to do? Tywin exhaled through his nose, setting the goblet down. That depends. He looked at the letter again, his gaze lingering on one particular line. I would want a powerful man such as yourself as my hand. It was not a demand. It was an offer. Tywin's mind raced, weighing the possibilities. Whoever this Shadow Monarch was, he was not an ordinary fool. Most would seek to destroy House Lannister, not recruit him. That meant one thing: whoever sent this letter knew exactly how Westeros worked. He is no king, Tywin finally said. But he is not a fool either, that I can tell. And that is what makes him dangerous. Kevin looked at him, awaiting further orders. Tywin steepled his fingers and smirked. Let's see what happens next. King's Landing. The small council chamber ever full of tension, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shadows against the stone walls. At the head of the table, Tyrion Lannister, acting hand of the king, sipped his wine and pinched the bridge of his nose as Varys, the spider, read aloud from the latest Raven's letter. To the rulers of Westeros, Varys began, his smooth voice carrying a hint of amusement. The true Lord of the Seven Kingdoms is coming, and it is neither a Stark nor any of the petty 5 kings. Tell your false king this: the Shadow Monarch is coming for you. Bend the knee, or become my eternal loyal servants. The room fell silent for a brief moment before Joffrey Baratheon burst into laughter, an obnoxious, high-pitched cackle that grated on everyone's nerves. What kind of fool wrote this? Joffrey sneered, slamming a golden goblet onto the table. Some peasant thinks he can make demands of his king his king. He turned to Cersei, expecting her agreement. Mother, shall I have this fool flayed alive when he dares show his face? Cersei Lannister barely glanced at her son, swirling her own goblet with mild interest. Another pretender. What else is new? Shall we call this the 6th king now? I must admit, Littlefinger chimed in, his smirk barely concealed, Shadow Monarch is a more creative title than King in the North, or the Usurper's Dog. He chuckled, tapping his fingers against the table. But it's all the same. Someone with delusions of grandeur, making threats he cannot enforce. Indeed, Varys agreed, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. Yet, it is curious that Maester Luwin, a man known for his wisdom, would send such a message on behalf of someone. Either he has lost his mind, or he has seen something. Oh, please. Joffrey scoffed, kicking his feet up on the table with all the arrogance of a boy who had never fought a day in his life. These old fools are easily swayed by superstition. Shadow Monarch, ha. Let him come. I'll have his head on a spike before he can crawl out of whatever hole he came from. Tyrion, however, remained silent. Unlike the others, he wasn't so quick to dismiss the letter. His sharp mind turned over the words carefully, dissecting their intent. Bend the knee, or become my eternal loyal servants, that part unsettled him. It did not sound like mere conquest, it sounded absolute. He opened his mouth to speak, to raise a word of caution. And then the torches in the chamber flickered violently, casting wild shadows across the walls. A chill swept through the room. The air turned heavy, pressing against their chests like an unseen force. Then, it appeared. A shadow soldier stepped forward from the darkest corner of the chamber, its form shifting like liquid midnight. Its eyes, 2 burning embers, locked onto the table of the most powerful people in the realm. The guards at the doors reacted first, drawing swords and stepping forward, but the creature barely acknowledged them. Instead, it moved fast, too fast, gliding toward the table without a sound. Joffrey shrieked, stumbling out of his chair. Kill it! Kill it! The Kingsguard surged forward, their blades slashing through the air, but they cut through nothing. The shadow moved like smoke, slipping between their attacks effortlessly. What sorcery is this? Cersei gasped, rising from her seat, her face pale with fear. Tyrion stood frozen, his mind racing, trying to comprehend what was happening. The shadow ignored them all. It had one target. Joffrey screamed, scrambling backward as the shadow lunged at him. The boy king fell over his own feet, his golden crown tumbling to the floor with a hollow clink. No. No, I am the king. Joffrey shrieked, his voice cracking. You can't. The shadow's hand wrapped around his throat. Joffrey gagged, clawing at the air, his eyes bulging as the life was drained from his body. The entire chamber watched in horror, frozen in place. His kicks grew weaker. His struggles turned feeble. And then, snap. His body went limp. The shadow dropped him like a discarded ragdoll. The once proud king of Westeros lay dead on the floor, his eyes staring lifelessly at the ceiling. The shadow turned its gaze on the small council as if daring any of them to move. But none did. Then, just as quickly as it came, it vanished. Silence. For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Then, finally, Cersei shattered the stillness with a scream so raw, so full of grief and rage, that the very walls of the chamber seemed to tremble. My son. She lunged forward, cradling Joffrey's lifeless body in her arms, her golden hair disheveled, her face contorted in anguish. The small council was paralyzed, their faces drained of color. Varys was stone-faced, though his hands trembled slightly. Baelish's smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by something much more rare on it, unease. Tyrion swallowed hard, his mind whirling. He had seen many things in his life, but this was something else. Slowly, he looked down at the fallen letter on the table. The Shadow Monarch is coming for you. Tyrion exhaled sharply. 7 hells. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 27 comments, 0 vote. Shadowlands Call. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. The harbor of Widow's Watch was restless beneath the twilight sky, waves crashing against the wooden piers as House Flint's men worked hastily to prepare the ship. Cold winds rolled off the sea, carrying the briny scent of saltwater and the promise of a long journey ahead. Aeron stood at the edge of the dock, his cloak billowing, the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at his lips. His eyes drifted to the distant horizon, but his thoughts were elsewhere, across the realm, where his shadow soldiers had just delivered death to those who needed it most. Exhaled slowly, then spoke, his voice tinged with satisfaction. It's done. The gathered men from House Flint looked at him, uncertain of his meaning. Their leader, a seasoned sailor with graying hair and a scar across his cheek, cleared his throat. My lord. Aeron turned to him, his smirk widening. Nothing to concern yourselves with. Just the first ripple of a coming storm. And I'm not a lord, yet. The older man exchanged glances with his men, wary but knowing better than to ask questions. He had heard enough whispers about this man, about what had happened in Winterfell, and about the monsters that had moved in the night. The Flints were loyal to the Starks, but they weren't fools. If Bran Stark had given his orders, they would obey. The ship is stocked and ready, the old sailor said. We've given you 15 of our best men. They're fighters and sailors both. If you need more, this will do. Aeron cut him off with a nod. I don't need an army for where I'm going. I already do, he thought to himself. Behind him, Raya adjusted her sword belt, her piercing gaze scanning the ship as the crew finished preparations. Unlike the others, she wasn't merely following orders, she had thrown her lot in with him. And yet, as she watched his expression, a rare thing crept into her voice. Why the grin, Aeron? She asked, tilting her head. What did you do? Aeron turned to her, chuckling softly. Just clearing the board. A few kings and lords needed to be dealt with. Consider it an investment in a more interesting future. The look she gave him was one of mild exasperation. Isn't this just making enemies? He stepped onto the wooden plank leading to the deck, not even bothering to look back. I don't make enemies, Raya. I simply remove obstacles. She sighed, following him up, but there was an amused glint in her eye. As soon as they stepped aboard, Aeron turned to the crew. We sail now. No more delays. The sailors scrambled into action, untying the last ropes, raising the sails. The wooden vessel groaned as it began to drift from the dock, the cold sea embracing it. Raya, standing beside him, suddenly narrowed her eyes. We're leaving Westeros now. Just like that. Aeron glanced at her, the flickering lanterns casting sharp shadows over his face. Yes. Raya crossed her arms. You said it yourself. You have enough power to take Westeros now. Why are we running? Aeron turned his gaze to the dark sea, watching the waves break against the ship's hull. Because someone else will try to take it after I do. She frowned, puzzled. Who? Aeron's smirk deepened. Daenerys Targaryen. Raya blinked. For the first time in a long while, genuine surprise crossed her face. A Targaryen. Alive. Aeron nodded. More than just alive. She has a claim, a purpose, and more importantly. He turned to face her fully. She has dragons. The wind howled around them as Raya stared at him, searching his face for any sign of jest. But there was none. You want her dragons? She asked, her voice edged with suspicion. Aeron's expression remained unreadable. I want more than that. She craves the Iron Throne. More than anyone. But I won't allow it, not without an alternative. An alternative? Raya scoffed. You're going to make her an offer. Aeron turned back to the sea, his gaze fixed beyond the dark waves. She'll listen. Or she won't. He shrugged. Either way, the game changes. And that's not the real reason why I am heading to Essos. Raya shook her head, exhaling. I don't understand you. If Daenerys isn't the real reason for this journey, then what is? Aeron didn't answer immediately. The ship had fully pulled away from the dock now, and the lanterns of Widow's Watch grew distant in the night. The air smelled of salt and destiny. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower, almost as if he were speaking more to himself than to her. Beyond Karth, beyond Ashai, lies a land that most men don't dare speak of. He leaned against the railing, eyes locked on the endless abyss ahead. The Shadow Lands. A place of mystery, danger, and unknown power. Raya's brows furrowed. The Shadow Lands. What could you possibly want there? Aeron exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the ship's railing. I don't know. His voice was quiet now, thoughtful. But something is pulling me there. I can feel it. And I know that whatever it is, it will be interesting. Raya exhaled, crossing her arms as the sea breeze tugged at her cloak. Fine, she muttered, watching him carefully. As long as you know what you're doing. Aeron didn't respond immediately. Instead, he simply smiled, a slow, knowing smirk curling his lips. With a thought, he pulled up his system notification. Aeron Grim. Job: Necromancer. Title: All-knowing, instantly understand new concepts, plus 50% learning speed, automatically identify items, creatures, and magic. Level: 23. Fatigue: 0. HP: 1700. MP: 2650. Strength: 57 right pointing arrow 60. Health: 39 right pointing arrow 42. Agility: 29 right pointing arrow 41. Intelligence: 58 right pointing arrow 61. Sense: 29 right pointing arrow 32. Available ability points: 9 right pointing arrow 0. Passive skill: Tenacity, level 1. Skills: Ruler's Authority. Perception, +10 to sense when analyzing or strategizing. Job-specific skills: Shadow Extraction 38/50th Soldier's Limit. Shadow Exchange. Monarch's Domain. Unawakened Skill. Inventory. Direfang's Sword. Aeron chuckled to himself, shaking his head. I can't believe I leveled up just from killing those fools. His tone was almost dismissive, as if he hadn't just altered the balance of power in Westeros. He ran a hand through his dark hair, feeling the familiar surge of strength coursing through his limbs. He allocated his remaining ability points, pouring them all into agility, feeling his muscles sharpen, his reflexes heighten, his body becoming faster, deadlier. Then, something else caught his eye. A new title. New title earned, Kingslayer. Effects: +5 strength, +5 agility, +5 sense. Enemies of noble birth instinctively fear you, -10% morale to noble-led forces. Kingslayer, huh? He smirked. Aeron let out a low whistle. Fitting, I suppose. Raya raised a brow, watching him with mild amusement. Talking to yourself again. Aeron chuckled. Just appreciating my work. Aeron's eyes suddenly burned with an eerie glow. His expression shifted, like a man who had just found something he had long been searching for. A slow smile spread across his face. So, he found it. Raya furrowed her brows. Who found what? Aeron didn't answer. Instead, his gaze flickered over the ship, taking in the men House Flint had provided him. They were all hardened Northmen, loyal to Bran's orders, but they were still Westerosi, they still feared what they didn't understand. He let out a frustrated sigh. Ah, fuck it. He turned and called out a name. Garm. A chilling gust of wind howled across the deck, and the men staggered back as a towering beast emerged from the shadows. Garm, his massive, jet-black wolf, stepped onto the deck, its fur rippling unnaturally as though it were made of living shadow. Its burning crimson eyes scanned the men. A single deep growl sent a shiver through their spines. God save us, one of the Northmen whispered, gripping his sword with trembling hands. What in the name of the old gods is that? Another exclaimed, taking a nervous step back. One particularly brave fool reached for his weapon. Aeron didn't even turn to look at him. Draw steel against him, and you won't even have time to regret it. The man froze. Aeron stepped forward and ran a hand through Garm's thick, shadowy fur. Stay here. Guard her. Kill anyone who does something stupid. Garm huffed, its massive frame looming over the trembling crew. Raya's arms crossed. You really don't care if you show anyone what you can do now, do you? Aeron chuckled, his smile sharp. I'll be their monarch soon. It doesn't matter. He stepped back, rolling his shoulders. Anyways, be seeing you. Then, he spoke a single word. Exchange. A violent gust of black wind erupted around him. The world seemed to shudder. His form twisted and distorted into pure shadow, and in an instant, he was gone. In his place, a shadow soldier stood silently. The crew gasped, some stumbling back in shock. 7 hells. What did he just do? Raya sighed, rubbing her temples. You get used to it. Garm simply growled, and the men wisely stayed silent. Darkness. Aeron materialized in an instant, his boots clicking against the stone floor of the Red Keep's dungeons. The air was stifling. Ancient. Heavy of history and death. His glowing eyes flickered in the dim torchlight, scanning the massive, gaping skulls of dragons long dead. The shadows of their open maws stretched across the walls like demons frozen in time. Aeron took a deep breath, his expression unreadable. Hello there. His voice echoed through the chamber. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. 22 comments, 0 vote. Failed extraction. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron stood still in the heart of the dungeon, the musty air thick with the weight of centuries. The stone walls of the Red Keep seemed to close in around him, the distant sounds of the castle muffled by the oppressive silence of the underground chamber. The torchlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced like forgotten ghosts. The dragon skulls loomed before him, different sizes and imposing, their hollow eyes staring out like silent witnesses to the passage of time. Each skull told a story. A tale of power, destruction, and the bloodied hands that had shaped Westeros. Aeron's footsteps echoed in the eerie silence as he stepped closer to the first skull, his eyes glowing faintly, a reflection of the weight of what he was about to do. His fingers brushed lightly against the first bone, and he began to speak, his voice soft, reverberating in the vast chamber. Melis. He whispered, his gaze tracing the outline of the first skull. The beast who lived for war. Killed with honor, burned with fury. He stepped forward again, his eyes scanning the next skull, a sense of reverence in his voice. Merix's. The beauty of the Targaryen dynasty. Her wings brought light and fire. But even she couldn't escape the passing of time. His eyes burned brighter now, the weight of the knowledge he carried, the deep, eternal knowledge, pulling him closer. He moved onward, each skull more impressive than the last. Finally, he stopped in front of the skull that seemed to dwarf all others, even the shadows seemed to cower before it. It was Balerion the Dread. The skull was massive, jagged, and ancient, every piece of bone still radiating a dark, eerie energy, a testament to the power that had once ruled the skies and kingdoms. Aeron's breath caught for a moment as he looked up into the empty sockets of Balerion's skull. His fingers trembled slightly as they hovered near the skull, but he did not touch it. His eyes burned brighter, now a fiery glow that could pierce even the darkness of the chamber. He stood before the remains of the greatest dragon to ever live, and for the first time in a long while since he woke up in this world, he felt something other than just power. It was reverence, a kind of awe that filled him and caused his chest to tighten. He leaned forward slightly, speaking to the skull as if Balerion could hear him, his voice low and filled with an almost primal respect. Balerion the Dread. Aeron's voice was almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of ages. The dragon that died of old age because no one could kill it. He paused, his eyes glowing fiercely now, as if challenging the very essence of the dragon that had once conquered the skies. Aeron stood before the massive skull of Balerion, his breath steady and his pulse quickening. The weight of the dragon's legacy felt heavier now that he was so close. He extended his hands, fingers splayed, his palms facing the skull of the dead dragon. A low murmur of command rumbled from his lips, more like a growl than a word. Arise. For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber remained still, the flickering torchlight casting shadows that danced on the walls. But then, as if some ancient power had stirred, the skull of Balerion seemed to tremble, a soft, almost imperceptible shake. The air around Aeron grew thick with dark energy. Then, it happened. The air hummed. The shadows in the room seemed to distort, rippling with a violent force. A howl, guttural and raw, echoed from the very bones of the skull, a sound that should not have been possible, a dragon's cry, filled with pain and rage. It was as if the dragon's spirit still lingered, straining to break free from the shackles of death. But despite the howl, the skull remained silent. The tremors in the air slowed, then stilled, as the shadows that had risen quickly dissipated back into the air, leaving only the cold, lifeless remains of the dragon. Aeron's face hardened. He stood frozen for a moment, staring at the skull. The shadow extraction had failed. He had felt the power course through him, the energy that should have brought this ancient beast back to life. Yet, despite his best efforts, Balerion remained as it was, dead. His eyes glowed fiercely again, the intensity of his focus mounting as his fingers curled, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. Arise. The second attempt was even more violent. The skull trembled again, the shadows swirling around it, the air humming with energy. The ground beneath Aeron seemed to vibrate, the essence of life tugging at the remains. He could almost feel it. The dragon was coming back. But as quickly as the shadows had risen, they began to break apart. The howl, fiercer this time, echoed again, but it was not enough. The skull cracked, the shadows collapsed inward like an implosion. The energy returned to nothing, and the room fell into a stifling silence. Balerion was still just a skull in a dungeon. Aeron felt his chest tighten with frustration. His eyes flickered, glowing brighter as a system notification flashed in his vision. He clenched his jaw, reading it over. System notification. Target has been dead for too long. Shadow extraction level is too low. Attempt failed. 2/3 attempts used. His hands fell to his sides, fists clenched, as the realization hit him. With a sharp exhale, he lowered his hands, and his eyes dimmed slightly as he considered the system's words. Shadow extraction level too low, so it means there is a chance I can do it once I master it. Aeron lifted his head, his eyes burning again with purpose. No matter, he muttered softly. I will find a way in the future. Even Balerion's shadow will fall to me. I have plenty of time. Aeron turned away from the skull of Balerion, his mind still racing, trying to piece together the failure. His feet began to carry him towards the exit of the dungeons. The air around him felt heavy, filled with the echoes of long-dead dragons. Yet, it still gnawed at him, the taste of failure, and the fact that he hadn't yet mastered this particular form of power. His thoughts were so consumed by the pull of those dragons and the weight of the moment that he didn't realize he had failed to secure his surroundings. The sudden voice, cold and sharp, broke through his concentration. Who are you? Aeron's head snapped up, his eyes glowing, a defensive stance flickering through his body. He was ready to summon shadows, ready to fight off whoever dared to intrude on him in this moment. But what he found instead was a familiar figure, Tyrion Lannister standing just a few feet away, holding a torch high, the flickering light casting eerie shadows across his face. Aeron's lips curled into a small, amused smile, his eyes narrowing slightly. Oh, if it isn't the Golden Dwarf, he said with an edge to his voice, his tone laced with amusement. His eyes scanned Tyrion for a moment, taking in the way the torchlight danced on the man's features. Tyrion blinked, his lips curling into a smirk as he took a step closer, the torch held steady in his hand, its flame casting a golden hue around his face. Well, that's a new title. I've been called worse, Tyrion said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, as always. He glanced Aeron up and down with a sharp gaze, clearly sizing him up. What are you? Some sort of assassin? If so, I think you are a little bit late for the party, or are you just a very tall man with a fancy sense of fashion? He waved the torch at Aeron's form, trying to assess the stranger's intentions. Aeron raised an eyebrow at the dwarf's words. His amusement never faltered. You think I'm an assassin, then? He crossed his arms, his stance shifting slightly. Tyrion scoffed, rolling his eyes, and took another step forward, his hand still clutching the torch. Assassin, wanderer, trespasser, pick your poison. Who are you, really? He wasn't afraid. It was clear that Tyrion Lannister, despite his size and the situation, was the type of man who wouldn't be intimidated easily. His intelligence was sharper than his physical stature. Aeron's eyes glowed fiercely as he faced Tyrion Lannister in the dim light of the Red Keep's dungeons. His voice was laced with menace. Joffrey is dead, isn't he? Aeron's tone was low, almost as if savoring the words. There was no mistaking the cold satisfaction in his voice, and Tyrion froze for a moment, the flickering torchlight casting shadows across his face. His fingers tightened around the torch, and the air between them seemed to hum with tension. And as for who I am, I suppose you can already tell, since you received my letter. Aeron's lips curled into a small, sharp smile, his eyes never leaving Tyrion. For a long moment, Tyrion stood still, his sharp mind working rapidly to connect the dots. His eyes widened ever so slightly, a glint of recognition flashing in the depth of them as realization hit him like a sudden gust of cold wind. You're the Shadow Monarch. Tyrion's voice was a mix of disbelief and cautious understanding, as though he was only just starting to grasp the magnitude of the situation. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 23 comments 0 vote. Astaper. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Aeron simply smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his lips as his glittering eyes bored into Tyrion. The dim torchlight flickered against the dungeon walls, creating long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly, as if succumbing to Aeron's presence. I'll be going now, Lannister, Aeron said smoothly, his voice amused. But I'll be back. And do try to live, I may still have a use for you. Tyrion's brows furrowed slightly at that, his sharp mind already racing through what that could possibly mean. But before he could form a response, Aeron exhaled a whisper of a chuckle, tilting his head ever so slightly. Exchange. And just as quickly, Aeron was gone. The air itself around Tyrion trembled, as if the world itself had blinked for a moment. Where Aeron had stood, a tangle of twisting black tendrils formed into something new, a shadow soldier, its body an inky silhouette with burning, blue eyes. Tyrion had no time to respond before the thing attacked. The first of his words was lost on the air. He drew a sharp breath, stumbling backward as he flung his arms up defensively, his shocked mind incapable of registering anything except danger. The torch he was holding danced crazily, casting mad shadows as the monstrous figure loomed over him, its unnatural presence pressing on his chest like a weight of sheer terror. For a moment, he was certain this was the end. That thing was going to kill him. Then, nothing. Silence. Tyrion opened one eye. Then the other. The dungeon was empty. The shadow had gone. The torches flickered feebly against the ancient dragon skulls, making only the normal patterns of cold stone and forgotten relics. No Aeron. No shadow soldier. No sign that anything had ever been there. Tyrion exhaled suddenly, lowering his trembling hands. His breath came in ragged gasps, his heart thudding against his throat. He turned slowly, his eyes searching every black corner, every crack in the stone, as though expecting the specter to leap out of the shadows once more. But there was nothing. His lips parted slightly, his mind caught between reason and madness. Maybe I did have too much wine after all, he said to himself, rubbing a hand over his face. His fingers felt somewhat damp. He let out a dry laugh, but it did nothing to help the constriction in his chest. If I tell anyone about this, they'll think I've gone mad. He gazed up at Balerion the Dread's skull, its vacant sockets seeming to stare at him like some kind of joke. Tyrion sighed, rubbing his temples. No more midnight walks in the dungeons, he told himself, climbing the stairs with weary steps. And fewer wine before bed, for sure. Aeron stepped back onto the deck of the ship, his boots thudding heavily against the wooden planks as the salty sea air whipped around him. He was visibly irritated, his eyes glowing faintly from the annoyance that still simmered beneath the surface. Raya, lounging lazily by the helm, raised an eyebrow as she absorbed his sour face. You're back already. That didn't take long, she remarked, her voice dripping with false curiosity. Aeron didn't even look at her, opting instead to stare out at the open, endless expanse of sea before him. I don't want to talk about it, he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. Raya leaned back against the railing, her arms folded across her chest, a smile teasing her lips. Oh. Didn't find anything of interest. She mocked, clearly enjoying his unease. Aeron's jaw tightened, he couldn't help but be annoyed at the failed attempt of bringing up the dragon of his dreams, he pushed a hand through his hair, turning to gaze out to sea once more. I did find what I wanted, he said, his voice low and almost bitter. I just couldn't take it for now. Raya's smile faltered, but she did not push the matter any farther. She just nodded, giving him the time to untangle whatever was racing through his mind. All right, she said, her voice somewhat gentler. Get ready, Aeron called out to the crew, his voice cutting through the air with authority. Once we reach Slaver's Bay, it's going to be a hostile place, and there's no mercy to be found there. Pirates, slavers. You name it. Stay alert, and be wary of your surroundings. They know this part of the sea better than anyone. 2 weeks later. The ship rocked gently against the waves as it finally neared the shores of Astaper. For days, the crew had navigated the dangerous waters, but now, with the city of Astaper finally on the horizon, their eyes gleamed with excitement. The distant, imposing silhouette of the city loomed before them, standing tall at the edge of Slaver's Bay. Land. One of the crew members called out, his voice echoing across the deck. We've reached the city. The loud cry broke the silence of the ship, shaking Aeron from his restless sleep. He had been lying on a cot in the cabin below deck, his mind tangled with thoughts he hadn't yet fully sorted. He shot upright, his chest rising and falling with a quick breath, eyes wide as the sleep left him in a rush. His senses snapped into focus, and it took him a moment to adjust to the noise above. What the hell? He muttered under his breath, still groggy, as he quickly gathered himself. His eyes glowed faintly, and with a frustrated sigh, he muttered to himself, waking me up like that. With a grunt, Aeron pushed himself out of the cabin and onto the deck, rubbing his face and trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. The salty sea air hit his face, sharp and cold, and it cleared his mind immediately. His gaze swept over the crew, most of whom were gathered at the edge of the ship, staring at the distant city ahead. You could have let me sleep some more, Aeron said dryly, though his voice carried an edge of amusement. One of the men looked back at him, pointing toward the horizon. It's Astaper, my lord. We made it. Aeron's gaze followed the man's gesture, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the city of Astaper. The tall walls, the looming towers. Everything looked as he had imagined. But there was something unsettling about the calm. No sign of pirates. Aeron asked, his voice more serious now. The men exchanged looks, then shook their heads. No, my lord. Not a single one. Aeron's brow furrowed, his mind working quickly as he examined the still waters surrounding the city. The peacefulness of it all was a bit strange. We've been at sea for almost 2 weeks now, he muttered, mostly to himself. No attacks. Not even a single skirmish. That's odd. You'd think someone would try their luck. Aeron tilted his head. I think Daenerys is doing a better job here than I thought. Or maybe we've just been lucky at sea. Raya paused, her eyes narrowing as his fingers drummed the side of the railing. Maybe. But I have a feeling the attackers got lucky this time. Aeron leaned against the railing, staring out at the city of Astaper with narrowed eyes. The crimson-stained walls stood tall, the very place where the infamous Unsullied were forged. The cockless men are made here, he exhaled, rubbing his jaw in thought. Daenerys should be queen of this place by now, he mused, mostly to himself. But I don't think she's taken Yunkai or Marine yet. His gaze flickered with impatience. We shouldn't waste time, I need to find her. Raya, standing beside him, shot him a curious glance. She had been watching him ever since they set sail, noting how determined he was about this one particular woman. Finally, she crossed her arms and asked, why do you really want her? Aeron smirked, turning his head slightly to meet her gaze. There was a flicker of something unreadable in his glowing eyes. Honestly. He let the question hang in the air for a moment before shrugging. If she agrees to my offer, so be it. Raya's brows furrowed. And if she doesn't? Aeron's expression darkened slightly, but his smirk remained. He turned his gaze back toward the city, the sea breeze rustling his hair. Then I'll claim her dragons. There was no hesitation in his words, no doubt. Just cold certainty. Aeron and his men approached the great red gates of Astaper near the docks, the scent of salt and sweat lingered in the air, the towering walls loomed over them, streaked with the blood-stained hue that marked the infamous city of slavers. The moment they drew near, a squad of guards stepped forward, their weapons raised in warning. Clad in mismatched armor, their faces concealed behind bronze helms, the guards leveled their spears, blocking their path. One of them stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding as he spoke in High Valyrian. Iseros. Skoros Isiao doing Kesir is Astaper. Strangers. What are you doing here in Astaper? Aeron understood them instantly. For a brief moment, he couldn't help but smirk to himself. Well, would you look at that? The day has finally come where I can actually use a fictional language for something useful. Aeron stepped forward, his expression shifting back to one of quiet authority. Eyes glowing faintly, he met the guard's stares head-on before responding in perfect, fluent High Valyrian. Iksan hen Westeros say Iksan kesir najat liaragan bisa valley. I'm from Westeros and I'm here to sell these men. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 15 comments 0 vote. Meeting the Mother of Dragons. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron stepped into the heart of Astapor with a calm stride, the air thick with the scent of saltwater and the sounds of distant voices. His northerners followed, still gaping at him in disbelief, whispers filling the air. How did you manage that, my lord? One of them asked, his voice full of awe. Talk their tongue like it's your own. We thought that High Valyrian was only spoken by the nobles and the Valyrian-blooded. Aeron smiled a small, enigmatic smile. I said something pleasant. Another of his soldiers chuckled, shaking his head. You always have something up your sleeve, don't you, my lord? Raya, keeping pace at his side, gave him a skeptical glance. What exactly did you tell them? Aeron winked. Nothing they need to worry about. They didn't need to know the truth, after all. As they walked through the city, a barracks-style building stood out, full of movement. Dark, close-fitting armor-wearing soldiers approached and departed, their eyes scanning the streets with trained vigilance. A tall, imposing captain of the Unsullied guarded the door, his eyes flashing toward Aeron and his men. The captain spoke to them in High Valyrian, his tone formal, yet unfazed by the newcomers. You will come with me, he said, motioning toward a nearby area where a pair of soldiers began to move toward them, preparing to restrain the men. The northerners at once stiffened, confusion and alarm crossing their faces. What are they doing, my lord? One of them ventured, eyes open wide. Why are we being held? Aeron's gaze flicked over to them, the peace in his eyes comforting, though in his head, he was running. He could feel the familiar sensation of a plan coming together. Don't worry, he said calmly, his voice firm and reassuring. This is part of their traditions. They bind all strangers who come through here. The captain's eyes tightened a bit as he advanced, one of his men moving to cuff Aeron's crew. They were led to a small, guarded chamber, where the soldiers began to prepare them for whatever strange procedure they had to undergo. Aeron stayed still, watching quietly, but his mind was already connecting the dots. If Daenerys has indeed abolished slavery here, they'd be bringing me straight before her for trial. Or death. He gave Raya a hasty glance, who remained staring at the scene in confusion. This is the fastest way to find her. It's a tad too risky, but something I can handle. Raya stared him down, her brows furrowed. What's really going on, Aeron? He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Trust me. We're doing this the quickest way possible. Her expression softened for a moment, but there was still uncertainty in her eyes. She trusted him, she always had, but this situation felt different. Still, she gave a reluctant nod, letting him lead the way. The Unsullied captain towered above them, regarding Aeron with icy, calculating stares. But even as the moment hung suspended, Aeron remained impassive. His next step was already mapped out. The air inside the grand chamber of Daenerys' palace felt heavy with tension while she sat on her throne, surrounded by her trusted advisors. Her violet eyes, as pale as dragon glass, were focused on the reports from the city, but her thoughts lingered elsewhere on her next move to conquer the remaining cities Yunkai and Marine. The echoes of her past of betrayal, war, and the long journey to this city still weighed heavily on her heart. She had fought, bled, and sacrificed to get here. Now, as queen of a city of freed slaves she had liberated, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held. In High Valyrian, Daenerys' voice rang out, smooth yet with a sharp edge of curiosity, Skoriat Gontan Bisa Vala Mazigan Hen. Where did this man come from? Missandei stood at her side, she paused, her brow furrowed for a moment as she turned to face Daenerys. Bisa Vala Mazigan Hen Vesteros, se ziri pahash bona ziri iksos Belmertes. This man came from Westeros, and he says that he is a slaver. Daenerys felt a pang of irritation rise in her chest. Her fingers gripped the arms of her throne as her gaze shifted toward the man standing before her. He was cuffed, his expression unwavering, and she could feel the weight of his presence in the room. The air around them seemed to grow thicker as she studied him, the defiance in his stance unnerving yet strangely compelling. Her eyes locked with his, her heart giving an unexpected flutter. Westeros, she thought. A slaver. The man remained still as stone, his gaze never once faltering, as if he were daring her to do something. Aeron, still bound by his restraints, didn't even flinch. His eyes never left Daenerys, and in a swift movement, he tore through his bindings as if they were nothing more than mere twine. The sound of the chains hitting the floor rang in the silence of the room. Her guards, Grey Worm and Jorah Mormont among them, moved into action, weapons drawn. Daenerys, hand raised with a calm and commanding gesture, stopping them in their tracks. She didn't need to speak for them to understand her command. The guards hesitated, eyes flicking between her and the man who had somehow broken his restraints. Aeron's gaze remained on Daenerys, intense and unwavering, and finally, he spoke, his voice fluid and strong. His words were in High Valyrian, but his confidence in the language made it sound like he was from Valyria itself. Nike Jeldon Najat Raynagan au Daenerys Targaryen, he said, his voice steady, clear, and calm. I wanted to meet you, Daenerys Targaryen. The words seemed to hang in the air between them like an invitation, a challenge, a promise all at once. Daenerys blinked, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place crossing her features. Her lips parted slightly as she processed what he just said. Grey Worm's hand tightened around his spear, ready to strike, but Daenerys raised her hand once more, stilling him. I said no, she repeated, her voice firm yet quiet. Daenerys took a step forward, her curiosity getting the better of her. You are from Westeros? She asked, her tone more thoughtful than accusatory. She studied him, trying to gauge his intentions. And you call yourself a slaver? What is it you want here? Aeron allowed a smile to cross his lips, though it wasn't one of mockery. Ha, a slaver, he said, his voice low and compelling. No, I'm not, I just said that to get to you. Daenerys tilted her head, her mind working as she studied the man who had come from across the seas. Then tell me, she said, her voice cold but intrigued. What is it you truly seek? But first, how did you speak my mother tongue? She said, her voice betraying her surprise. How is that even possible? Aeron's gaze softened just slightly as he answered, his voice calm, almost amused. Yes, I did learn it. Took some time, but it was worth it. Daenerys took a step closer, her eyes narrowing as she processed the implications of his words. A man not from a great house, not from Essos, and yet you can speak the Valyrian tongue. She shook her head, unable to suppress the disbelief. It doesn't make sense. Aeron's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, the firelight flickering across his face. You're probably informed already, but there is a war going on in Westeros right now. A war one can win easily. She laughed, a sound that was cold and sharp, like the crack of ice. Win easily. Strength alone is not enough, slaver. Just because you managed to uncuff yourself, doesn't mean you can win a war alone. I'd prefer to be called Aeron. Aeron's eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity. His voice dropped low, thick with certainty. Come out. The room fell silent. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, slowly, from the shadows around them, figures began to emerge, tall, imposing figures, with glowing eyes and an aura of malevolent power. Aeron's entire shadow army materialized before them, stretching in all directions like a dark tide. The soldiers were not mere men. A giant, beasts, they were shadows bound to his will, and their presence sent an electric shiver through the room. The Unsullied, Jorah Mormont, and Daenerys herself all froze in shock. The air felt heavy with the weight of their power, and for the first time, Daenerys truly understood that this man was not making false claim, nor like anyone she had ever faced before. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 23 comments 0 vote. To the Shadowlands. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. The room felt heavy, and tense as Aeron's shadow army loomed behind him, their glowing eyes burning like embers in the dimly lit hall. Their presence alone sent a clear message: this was no ordinary man. He had come with power, power beyond anything Daenerys had ever seen, and he was offering her something. Not as equals, but as partners in conquest. I'll have more soon enough, Aeron continued, his voice steady, unshaken. That petty war in Westeros is nothing. You've spent time in Essos. You know there is magic here, different kinds of sorceries, old and powerful. You could say I'm one of them. Except, he met her gaze, his eyes gleaming with a quiet certainty. I'm the strongest. Daenerys studied him carefully, her mind racing. He spoke with such confidence, such unwavering belief in his own power, that for a moment, she wondered if he truly could take the Seven Kingdoms alone. Still, she was not so easily swayed. If you claim you can take the Iron Throne alone, she said, tilting her head slightly, why did you come here for me? Aeron's lips curled into a faint smirk, as if he had anticipated the question. Because I know you very well, Daenerys Targaryen, he said. I know you seek revenge. I know you want the Iron Throne more than anyone. Which is why I offer you an alliance, with a certain time limit, I will not offer it again. He took a step closer, shadows curling at his feet like living smoke. You are a Targaryen. Be by my side. If they see you as their queen, they won't dare to act against me. And I won't have to rule a kingdom of undead and corpses, you'll be the blood and fire, but he paused, letting his words sink in. I will be the monarch. A sharp scoff broke the silence. Ridiculous. Jorah Mormont's voice was laced with disdain. He stepped forward, his face twisted in disbelief. You speak of sorcery as if it's enough to claim a throne. Magic does not make a king. It's men, loyalty, strategy. Aeron raised a hand slightly, and the shadows behind him shifted all towards Jorah. A cold wind swept through the chamber, and for the first time, Jorah truly saw them. Silent figures of death, countless in number, standing unnervingly still, locking eyes with him. A pit formed in his stomach. This wasn't just some trick, some cheap illusion. This was real. Jorah swallowed hard, his hand unconsciously tightening around the hilt of his sword. Daenerys opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Aeron cut her off. I have quite a number of soldiers scattered across the realms, he said, his voice cool and controlled. The only place where I have no real power, his eyes flickered, a hint of something deeper, something darker in them, is Essos. A quiet hum of unease filled the air. And that, Aeron continued, turning slightly, is why I'm heading to the Shadowlands. Silence fell over the room. Even Daenerys blinked in surprise. The Shadowlands. Where no sane man dared to tread, a place of whispers and horrors, of demons and forgotten legends. Few ever ventured there, and even fewer returned. And it's the place where her dragon eggs were brought from. He turned to his men, his expression unreadable. Alone. Rhea stiffened, her brows furrowing. You can't be serious. I thought that was a jest. Aeron simply smiled. You might think I'm being ridiculous, he said, glancing at Daenerys one last time, but I will return. His eyes gleamed, a storm brewing behind them. And when I do, I will come back with a power greater than any of you could ever imagine. A shiver ran through the room. Even the unsullied, disciplined and fearless, seemed unsettled. Aeron's voice was calm, yet it carried an undeniable weight. He spoke not as a peasant pleading for an alliance but as a man offering a deal he knew would be considered, whether now or later. Think about my offer. His violet eyes flickered in the dim torchlight. I know you need strength and power, and soon you'll conquer these pathetic city-states. Yunkai. Marine. His lips curved into a faint smirk. And all it would take is 3 baby dragons and a small army of cockless men. Aeron narrowed his eyes. I can do it myself. Then he let out a short laugh, amused by her clear looks of defiance, but before he could respond, he caught the faintest shift in movement. Jorah Mormont. The old knight lunged, his expression fierce, his instincts honed through years of battle. But before he could even swing, Aeron was gone. No, not gone. A blur of darkness. A gust of wind. And in the blink of an eye, Aeron reappeared behind him. The next thing Jorah felt was a force slamming into his ribs. A punch. Devastatingly fast, impossibly strong. His breath was driven from his lungs as he crashed to the ground, coughing. Gasps echoed through the hall. The unsullied tensed, gripping their spears, while Grey Worm shifted slightly, ready to act if needed. Missandei's eyes widened in shock. Even Daenerys froze for a moment, taken aback. Aeron barely spared Jorah a glance. Don't be stupid, Mormont, he said simply, his voice neither mocking nor cruel, just factual. She'll need you. For now. Jorah gritted his teeth, pushing himself onto one knee, but he made no move to attack again. There was no point. Aeron turned back to Daenerys, his movements fluid and unhurried. He placed one hand over his chest and gave a small, mocking bow. Munikea Zaldrizoti. Mother of Dragons. His Valyrian was flawless. Smooth. Almost too natural for someone not born to the language. Daenerys said nothing, only watching him, trying to gauge the man before her. Aeron straightened. Take care of my men, he said. I'll soon return for that response from you. Raya, standing a few steps behind, opened her mouth to speak. To argue. But Aeron cut her off before she could even start. It's not up for debate, he said without looking at her. I'll take some supplies and go alone. There was no room for negotiation. No room for anyone to follow. As he turned away, his thoughts were his own. I initially wanted the dragons, but they're still too damn small. Aeron. Daenerys's voice was firm, but there was an edge to it, something restrained beneath her usual fire. She didn't move, didn't take a step forward, only stood at the head of the hall, her violet eyes locked onto his own. For the first time in a long while, she hesitated. A man who moved like a shadow. A man who commanded them. His power was undeniable. And though pride burned hot in her chest, though she wanted to demand that he stay, she knew better. She knew what a reckless decision could cost. So she stayed silent. Aeron, without turning, smirked as if he could hear the battle raging in her mind. And then, with the slightest flick of his fingers, his shadow stirred. A fragment of darkness peeled away from his form, slipping unseen beneath the torches' glow. A shadow soldier. Silent. Invisible to all but him, was assigned to her. Aeron stepped out of the hall, boots echoing against the stone floor as the great doors swung open before him. Outside, the warm night air of Astapor greeted him, the city bathed in flickering lantern light. The scent of salt and spice lingered, carried by the breeze from the harbor. Technically, he mused to himself as he descended the palace steps, Essos is safer than Westeros, so those who came with me are well off to stay with Dany. No great lords with their petty ambitions. No whispers in the dark plotting behind his back. Just slavers and occasional assassins and weird people here and there. The gates of Astapor were left behind. The red-bricked city grew smaller in the distance, fading into the vast, open sands. The stars above stretched endlessly, a canvas of celestial fire. Aeron sat atop Garm's massive back, the beast's fur ruffling against the wind as they soared across the dunes, heading eastward. Towards Karth. Towards the Shadowlands beyond. Then, a pulse. A sudden shift. A notification. Unknown forces seek your death. They will soon cross your path. Aeron's violet eyes narrowed. The wind howled against him, but for the first time that night, it felt different. Like something was watching. Like something was waiting for him ahead. He smirked. About time. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 20 comments 0 vote. Aeron vs the Dothraki. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Lazar. A city of shepherds, nestled in the rolling grasslands of Essos, far removed from the brutality of Westeros. The air smelled of fresh earth, of livestock and the faint scent of cooking fires. The mud brick homes stood simple yet sturdy, their thatched roofs swaying under the evening breeze. For a moment, as Aeron entered the outskirts after a quick journey from Astapor, it almost felt peaceful. Almost. Because peace was a fragile thing in this world. And as he walked deeper into the city, that fragility shattered. It started with distant screams. Then, the thunder of hooves. Aeron exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as he turned his gaze toward the horizon. There, like a storm rolling over the plains, came the Dothraki. A Khalasar, easily over 100 strong, galloped toward the village, their horses whipping against the wind. The sun, now dipping below the horizon, cast their approaching figures in a golden light. It would have been beautiful. If not for the terror they carried with them. The Lizarine had already noticed. Shepherds dropped their staffs and ran. Women clutched their children and hurried toward their homes, bolting doors, praying to their sheep god. Others fell to their knees, pleading for mercy that would never come. Aeron sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets as he continued walking through the chaos. So this is what the system meant, huh? He muttered under his breath. Aeron hadn't paid much mind to it at the time. Now, it made sense. The Dothraki stormed into the city with ruthless efficiency. Riders swung curved araks, cutting down any man who tried to fight back. Others laughed as they set fire to homes, the flames licking hungrily at the dry straw roofs. It was a slaughter. Aeron, however, simply walked through it. A man sprinted past him, tripping over himself as a Dothraki rider bore down on him. The moment the arak swung, Aeron grabbed the man by the collar, yanking him out of harm's way with ease. The blade whipped through empty air. The Dothraki warrior yanked the reins, his horse skidding to a stop as he turned toward Aeron with a snarl. This one dares. He steals my kill. Aeron arched a brow. Steal. Come on, it's just one guy. You'll live. Before the rider could react, the call bellowed from atop his massive stallion. Surround him. And so they did. Over 100 Dothraki encircled Aeron, their horses pacing in tight circles, their eyes gleaming with amusement and bloodlust. Their call, a broad-shouldered warrior with a jagged scar across his chest, narrowed his gaze. Aeron stood in the center, arms crossed, expression bored. One rider spit on the ground. He does not wear our braids. He is no rider. No warrior. And doesn't look like he is from around here. Another snorted. He looks soft. Like the sheep fuckers. Laughter erupted among the riders. The call, however, silenced them with a single look. His eyes raked over Aeron, analyzing, measuring. Then, in a voice deep and commanding, he spoke. Take him. He will fetch a fine price. Two riders dismounted, stepping toward Aeron with iron shackles. Aeron let them come. Step by step, they drew closer, their grips tightening around their weapons, their smirks widening as they reached for his wrists. And then, he spoke. Indeed, I am not from around here. The words left his lips in perfect Dothraki. The effect was immediate. Some gasped. Others stiffened, eyes widening in disbelief. The two warriors in front of him halted mid-step, staring as if they had just seen a ghost. Even the call himself straightened slightly, his interest suddenly piqued. Aeron smirked. And I was looking for a warm-up. The earth beneath him shifted. A dark mist coiled around his feet, slithering like living shadows, stretching outward like grasping fingers. The temperature dropped ever so slightly, and for the first time, the Dothraki felt fear. The horses snorted, restless. A few reared back, their riders struggling to control them. The call's expression hardened. His instincts screamed at him. This was no ordinary man. Aeron tilted his head. Shall we begin, warriors? For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the first Dothraki charged. The system notification flickered in Aeron's vision. Kill the hostile savages. For a brief moment, he raised a brow. A different quest. But he pushed the thought aside. Right now, there were more pressing matters, like the horde of bloodthirsty Dothraki circling him, blades gleaming under the setting sun. Aeron exhaled slowly. His fingers flexed. My soldiers. His voice was low, almost a whisper. The ground beneath him shuddered. And then, darkness erupted. Dozens of figures burst forth from his own shadow, silent as death, their glowing eyes flickering like embers. Soldiers clad in jagged black armor, monstrous creatures with elongated claws, and a giant that should not exist in this world, yet they all do. All of them rose in a twisted, eerie unison. The Dothraki hesitated. Dark spirits. One of them shouted in sheer horror. Too late. The first shadow lunged, slicing clean through a rider's throat with a single motion. Blood sprayed the air like mist as the man toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Aeron moved next. He didn't waste time. With a flick of his wrist, Direfang materialized in his grasp. His sword gleamed under the twilight, its edges thirsting for blood. A rider charged straight for him, swinging his arak in a deadly arc. Only for Aeron to vanish in a blur of speed. Before the Dothraki could react, Aeron was already behind him. Shink. Direfang cleaved through his spine with ease. The rider's body split apart grotesquely, his upper half sliding off his horse while the lower half twitched helplessly in the saddle. Aeron didn't stop. He spun, ruler's authority activating. The air compressed, and with a mere flick of his fingers, an invisible force ripped three more riders off their horses, hurling them into the ground with bone-crushing force. Screams filled the night. His shadows swarmed the battlefield, tearing through the Dothraki like wolves in a herd of sheep. One shadow knight impaled a warrior straight through the heart before tossing his lifeless body aside. A shadow cat pounced on a struggling rider, its massive jaws snapping his skull like brittle glass. It was a massacre. Aeron barely broke a sweat. Two warriors rushed him from both sides, their araks aimed at his throat and ribs. Aeron caught one blade between his fingers, twisting it violently, shattering the metal like brittle ice before driving Direfang into the man's chest. The second attacker barely had time to react before Aeron's ruler's authority slammed him into the dirt with such force that his entire body caved in on itself. Blood pooled beneath his corpse. The battle lasted minutes, but for the Dothraki, it felt like an eternity of slaughter. And then, there was only one left. The call. He had dismounted, his legs trembling slightly. His once fierce expression was gone, replaced by something else. Pure. Unfiltered. Fear. Aeron's shadows surrounded him, a living sea of black steel. The world had gone quiet, the only sounds the distant crackling of flames from burning homes and the dying groans of his fallen men. The call's chest heaved. His lips parted as he stared at the monstrosity before him. This. He muttered in disbelief. This is not human. Aeron tilted his head, his own violet gaze glowing ominously in the dim light. He smiled. Oh. So even a Dothraki call can feel extreme fear. Aeron responding in perfect Dothraki. The call flinched. Aeron didn't need to hear an answer. With a simple gesture, he signaled. The massive, shadow cat, Fang, emerged. Its body was wreathed in swirling darkness, its glowing eyes locked onto the call with a predatory hunger. It pounced. The call barely had time to scream before the shadow cat's jaws closed around his head. And with a sickening crack, it bit down. Blood sprayed across the ground as the call's lifeless body thumped into the dirt, his head no longer attached. Then, silence. Aeron exhaled, shaking his head. Pathetic. A familiar notification appeared before him. You have leveled up. 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 The sheer number of Dothraki he and his shadows had slaughtered had granted him a surge in power. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. 13 comments, 0 vote. You do not belong here. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron stood amidst the sea of corpses, his breath steady despite the blood-drenched battlefield. Around him, the remains of the Dothraki horde lay in twisted, lifeless heaps, their horses fallen beside them. The earth was stained red, and the cries of the surviving Lizarine had long since faded into silence. Then, the system notification appeared before his eyes. New limit unlocked, Shadow Army capacity increased to 200. Aeron's lips curled into a smirk. 100 soldiers. That was more than enough. He exhaled slowly and raised a single hand over the battlefield. The air around him darkened, the shadows stretching unnaturally toward him like living things. Then, in a voice laced with absolute authority, he uttered a single word. Arise. The effect was instantaneous. A dark wave of shadow energy erupted from underneath his legs, surging across the battlefield like an all-consuming tide. Black mist coiled around the fallen. And then, they came forth. One by one, figures rose from the darkness. Not the bodies themselves, but shadows given form, emerging from the corpses like specters pulled from the void. Their eyes blazed violet, their bodies clad in an ethereal black mist that flickered and shifted like living smoke. The Dothraki had been reforged into creatures of the abyss, now standing in perfect, unyielding silence before their master. Even their horses, or rather, their shadows had been claimed. Black, spectral beasts with glowing violet eyes snorted, stamping their hooves on the blood-soaked ground. The Dothraki were known as the finest horsemen in the world, now, even death could not separate them from their steeds. And then, as one, the Black Horde knelt. Their new lord stood before them, his direfang resting against his shoulder. The shadow of the former call, once proud and untamed in life, now knelt the deepest, his violet eyes flickering with a ghostly submission. Aeron gazed upon them, his smirk widening. You were Dothraki, he said, his voice like a whisper of death itself. Warriors of the great grass sea. Unbroken. Unstoppable. His eyes glowed even brighter as he took a step forward, his shadow stretching across them like an eclipse. Now. You are something greater. The air crackled with unseen power as his violet gaze burned into his new soldiers. You are mine now. My horde. My shadows. The kneeling warriors growled in inhuman unison, the sound carrying across the empty battlefield, a promise of death to all who opposed them. The red waste stretched endlessly before him, a vast, desolate expanse of crimson sands and blistering heat. Even atop Garm's massive form, the heat gnawed at his skin, yet Aeron paid it no mind. The desolation, the emptiness of the place, it was almost peaceful. Almost. His gaze flickered to the lingering notification in the corner of his vision. Unknown forces seek your death. They will soon cross your path. Aeron clicked his tongue. As I thought. It had been there even before the slaughter in Lazar. A warning. Yet, something about it unsettled him. The system had never been vague before, his quests were clear, objectives definitive. But this was cryptic. What is that supposed to mean? He muttered. Garm rumbled beneath him, sensing his unease. And then he saw him. A lone figure stood in the distance. Aeron narrowed his eyes. There shouldn't be anyone here. The red waste was a graveyard to those who dared cross it unprepared. No food, no water. The very land rejected life itself. And yet this man stood, waiting. His cloak billowed ever so slightly in the dry wind, and his head was tilted downward, as if in quiet contemplation. Aeron slowed Garm to a halt, his voice carrying across the empty wasteland. Who the hell are you? No response. The man did not move, did not even acknowledge him. Aeron's hand gripped Direfang's hilt. There was something off about him. And then he saw it. For the briefest of moments, the man's face changed. A flicker, a shift like a rippling reflection on the surface of disturbed water. His features twisted, molding into something else entirely before snapping back into place. Aeron's breath hitched. His violet eyes narrowed. My mind isn't playing tricks with me, I know what I just saw. His blade slid free in a smooth motion, black steel catching the light of the dying sun. He dismounted from Garm with a practiced ease, his stance shifting into one of quiet readiness. He approached, slowly. You're not going to speak? Aeron asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Fine. Then die in silence. In the blink of an eye, he moved. Direfang whistled through the air, aimed straight for the man's throat. The figure reacted. A dagger, small, swift flashed from his cloak, intercepting Aeron's strike with unnatural precision. The force of the clash sent out a dull shockwave, dust kicking up around them. Aeron smirked. So, you're not just some wandering fool, yet this isn't the strength of a normal human. He pressed forward, launching a rapid flurry of deadly strikes, each one precise, calculated. The man parried, dodged, his movements eerily fluid, too fluid. His silence unnerved Aeron more than anything. No fear, no hesitation, what are you? Aeron switched tactics. His free hand shot forward, crackling with the invisible force of ruler's authority. The man jerked unnaturally, his body twisting away as if yanked by unseen strings, narrowly avoiding the telekinetic grip. But that brief moment of imbalance was all Aeron needed. He closed the distance in an instant. A single, brutal slash. Sank. The man's head separated from his body. For the first time, Aeron heard something a whisper, almost inaudible, escaping from the lifeless lips before the head hit the sand. Aeron stood there for a moment, his blade dripping with dark blood. He exhaled, staring at the corpse with narrowed eyes. Faceless men. He murmured, his mind racing. Did Westeros send them? Danny. No, this doesn't feel right. The faceless men didn't operate like this. They killed silently, from the shadows, without leaving a trace. A direct confrontation. It wasn't their style. Aeron muttered to himself. And then, he felt it. A chill. A presence. Aeron spun around. From the dunes, they emerged. Figures clad in dark, tattered cloaks, faces obscured, moving in eerie synchronization. There were many. More than 10. Their footsteps made no sound, their presence heavy yet unnatural. And then they spoke. You do not belong in this world. Aeron froze. His eyes widened not in fear, but in something far worse. Irritation. A nerve had been struck, sharp and deep. His grip on Direfang tightened, his jaw clenched. The shadows cast by the setting sun seemed to lengthen around him, as if mirroring the storm brewing within. Those words. Not a threat. Not a warning. A statement. They knew. Somehow, these people knew. His irritation boiled over into something sharp, dangerous. His violet eyes flashed, glowing ominously. Aeron took a slow, deliberate breath, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of their words. Then he smiled. Oh. I won't bother asking because I know you won't answer me. His voice was low, taunting. He tilted his head slightly, a glint of mockery in his gaze. So what will you do about it? No response. They merely stood there, unmoving, their presence pressing in on him like a vice. Aeron exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. Aeron exhaled, his irritation settling into something cold and merciless. He glanced at the figures before him, these nameless, faceless fools who dared to speak as if they understood his existence. You do not belong in this world. The words still echoed in his mind, but now they only fueled the rage simmering beneath his skin. He scoffed. You think you know me? What I am? His grip on Direfang tightened. Pathetic. He took a step back, not out of caution, but to make a point. I won't even kill you myself. And then, he raised his sword. The earth rumbled. Shadows twisted and rose like living smoke, forming dark figures with glowing violet eyes. The air grew thick with their presence, a creeping sense of inevitability settling over the battlefield. Aeron's voice dropped into something almost casual, as if he were ordering a simple chore. Annihilate them. Then, he smiled, tilting his head ever so slightly. Slowly. The shadows obeyed. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 10 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. FrenzyAren. Download app now. A change of plans. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron stood still, his violet eyes scanning the battlefield. All around him, the last remnants of the faceless assassins lay motionless, their twisted forms littering the sand like discarded rags. The echoes of battle had long faded, leaving only the whispering wind of the red waste as his companion. His shadow soldiers stood at attention, their dark, ethereal presence blending seamlessly with the eerie silence. One by one, they retreated into the darkness under his feet, vanishing into the void from which they came. Aeron tilted his head, his expression unreadable. How odd. He knew that magic in this world exists, fire-wielding priests, faceless killers, dragons that soared the skies. Westeros and Essos were both drenched in the unnatural, but these men, these creatures, they felt different. They did not feel human at all. Before he could ponder further, his vision suddenly blurred, and an all-too-familiar sound rang in his head. Ding. A message from the system. Quest completed. Unknown forces seek your death. They will soon cross your path. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. New item acquired. Silver fangs. A pair of poison daggers, forged from dark Valyrian steel. Legends say that when wielded together, they strike with the swiftness of a direwolf and the cunning of a shadowcat. Can inflict bleed and poison effect. Aeron furrowed his brows as dark mist coiled in front of him, taking shape, 2 slender daggers. They gleamed with a dull, sinister luster, their edges sharp enough to part the air itself. Black Valyrian steel, yet kissed with an eerie silver glow. A smirk curled his lips. Now this is interesting. Aeron let out a slow, controlled sigh. Well, as long as it's over, so this quest. It was all about them. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, collecting his thoughts. If they were the ones the system had warned him about, then this meant. Ding. His eyes snapped open. Another notification appeared before him. But this time, as he read the words, his breath caught. The message felt different. Colder. Heavier. As if it carried something far greater than a mere warning. The higher beings of this world have taken notice of you. You have been recognized as a major threat. Their 8 apostles now seek your death. Aeron felt his body tense, his fingers unconsciously tightening around Direfang's hilt. 8 apostles. Higher beings. The phrase echoed in his mind, repeating over and over. A sharp chuckle escaped his lips, though it carried no humor. Higher beings. You mean the gods? He shook his head, but there was something new in his gaze, something caught between intrigue and unease. They actually exist here. A part of him wanted to laugh. Another part of him wanted to curse. But mostly, he felt something new. Not fear. Not hesitation. Excitement. His eyes flicked back to the message, and before he could even begin to process the implications, another set of words materialized before him. New quest. The 8 Apostles. Eliminate the 8 Apostles and claim the Black Heart. Aeron exhaled, his mind racing. The Black Heart. His fingers twitched. He could already tell that meant unlocking the full reach of his Shadow Monarch powers. Something far greater was at play here. Aeron exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as he stared at the faceless men were gone, their bodies reduced to lifeless husks beneath the crimson-stained sand. The revelation still weighed on his mind. The higher beings of this world have taken notice of you. Well, this changes everything. He crouched down, dragging the tip of Direfang across the sand. A map began to take shape. The blade moved with precision, carving out the rough outlines of Westeros and Essos. He marked key locations, places where his influence had already begun to take root. I have a shadow soldier in King's Landing, he tapped the capital with the tip of his sword. One in the Riverlands, one in Winterfell. A pause. His violet eyes flickered for a brief moment, a pulse of energy surging through his mind. And one is getting closer to Storm's End. A small smirk formed on his lips. Everything in Westeros was falling into place. His shadows were embedded in crucial locations, ready to feed him information the moment anything significant happened. But here, in Essos, he let out a short breath. It's just me, aside from the one with Daenerys. His smirk faded. This new quest wasn't something he could ignore. The apostles were unlike any enemy he had faced before. What were they? Beings of divine power. Wretched, ancient forces. He didn't know, and that uncertainty irritated him. I need a change of plans. For a moment, Aeron remained silent, his fingers tracing over the sand. Then, his blade marked a distant land far beyond Ashai, his original destination. A decision was made. I will not head to Karth first. His grip tightened around his sword. His course had changed. He would send a soldier to venture into the Shadowlands directly instead. With a low whistle, the air trembled as Garm materialized beside him. The monstrous direwolf, a shadow of living darkness, towered over him, its eyes glowing. Aeron placed a hand on the beast's thick mane, turning toward the east. He pointed toward the farthest reaches of the map. Garm, head to the Shadowlands. As fast as you can. Without hesitation, the direwolf snarled and launched forward, its colossal frame vanishing into the horizon like a streak of black lightning. Next. Aeron raised his hand once more, calling forth Fang, his shadowcat. The creature emerged from his shadow, sleek and silent, its eyes gleaming with intelligence. He knelt, carving another mark on the sand. Fang, you go to Ashai. The cat flicked its tail, understanding the command instantly. In the next heartbeat, it blurred into the distance, its speed almost unnatural as it raced toward its destination. Aeron straightened, brushing the sand off his gloves. The pieces were in motion. Once they arrive, I'll exchange with them. Now, there was only one more thing to do. His violet eyes burned with power as he gazed upon Westeros, his mind reaching out across the vast distances where his shadows lurked. There's an opportunity I need to take. Exchange. And in an instant, Aeron vanished. Stormlands, Bronzegate. The cold wind carried the scent of the Stormlands, a mixture of damp earth and the salt of the distant sea. Aeron stood at the gates of Bronzegate Keep, the ancestral seat of House Buckler. Two guards stationed at the entrance clutched their spears tighter, their expressions turning wary at the sight of a lone figure approaching a hooded man draped in black, with an air of unnatural calm. His presence felt wrong in the most inexplicable way, as if the very shadows bent around him, whispering in silence. Oi, halt! One of the guards barked, stepping forward with his spear raised. Who in the seven hells are you? Aeron stopped just a few feet away, his violet eyes glinting beneath his hood. There was no need for theatrics. The Shadow Monarch. His voice was calm, deep, and absolute. Then, after a pause, he added, Your monarch. Silence fell. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, shifting uncomfortably under their armor. His presence, his very existence felt unnatural to them. One of the men, clearly more seasoned, tightened his grip on his spear and scoffed. Shadow what? Monarch. He sneered. Never heard of you, and I doubt Lord Buckler has either. If you're looking to beg for a place at his table, best turn around before we run you through. Aeron chuckled, tilting his head slightly. Run me through. The mere suggestion was almost amusing. The guard's sneer faltered. Something about the way Aeron spoke, that quiet amusement felt like a predator humoring prey. Enough talk, the other guard snapped, frustrated by the unease creeping up his spine. He leveled his spear. You're not getting through these gates. Now piss off. Aeron sighed as if he found this whole exchange tedious. Then, he moved. A blur of black. A gust of wind. Before either man could react, Aeron appeared behind them, standing mere inches from the great doors of FrenzyAren. The guards staggered forward, their breath caught in their throats. They hadn't even seen him move. One of them turned sharply, panic flickering in his eyes. What? Aeron did not answer. A soft whistle of wind. The guards remained standing for a heartbeat. Then another. Then, suddenly, their heads slid from their shoulders, severed so cleanly that they didn't even register their own deaths. Two heavy thuds. Their bodies crumpled, the bronze of their helmets clanking against the stone. Aeron sheathed his blade. He had cut them down without even sparing them a glance. His violet eyes, still impassive, lifted toward the looming gates of FrenzyAren Keep. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. 11 comments, 0 vote. Stormlands on fire. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. The banners of House Buckler lay trampled beneath blackened hooves. The scent of blood clung to the air, mixing with the dying embers of torched barricades. The keep that once stood as a proud stronghold of the Stormlands had fallen into absolute silence, save for the eerie whispers of the shadows that now claimed it. Atop the ramparts, the last defenders of FrenzyAren screamed. They were cut down swiftly, mercilessly, shadowy Dothraki warriors atop monstrous, spectral horses cleaving through armor and flesh alike. The ground was littered with corpses, yet the shadows only grew longer. A monstrous, black-furred beast, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural glow, pounced on a fleeing knight, tearing into him with a sickening crunch. The man barely had time to scream before the shadow cat's maw clamped around his throat. In the courtyard below, the last of the resistance fell. One by one. Some to blades. Some to fangs. None were spared. At the heart of it all, seated upon the Lord's own chair, Aeron watched. His violet eyes flickered beneath the dim torchlight, his fingers drumming against the armrest in quiet thought. His soldiers did not cheer, did not revel in their victory. They simply stood, silent and obedient, the very embodiment of death itself. Before him, on his knees, was one of House Buckler's surviving retainers. His face was pale, his body trembling as he tried and failed to ignore the countless eyes of Aeron's shadow soldiers glaring down at him. Aeron leaned forward, resting his chin against his knuckles. His presence alone felt suffocating. Tell me, his voice was smooth, controlled, yet beneath it, there was something else. Something cold. Your lord is missing. What news of House Baratheon of Storm's End? The man swallowed hard, gathering whatever scraps of courage he had left. Lord Buckler is with Stannis Baratheon, in the north. Aeron narrowed his eyes slightly. That wasn't the answer he wanted. His fingers tapped once against the chair. And the man hesitated. The shadows around him seemed to deepen. He glanced around, his breath quickening at the sight of the silent, waiting figures that surrounded him. Finally, he spoke. Lord Buckler is deserting. He intends to return to King Tommen's service. Aeron exhaled through his nose, unimpressed. I asked about Storm's End. The man flinched, sweat rolling down his forehead. It is still controlled by House Baratheon, but the keep itself is held by the forces of the Lannisters. A slow, knowing smirk crossed Aeron's lips. So, Storm's End is vulnerable. He leaned back in his chair, considering the opportunity before him. Storm's End. A stronghold like no other. Its walls had never been breached by siege. It was a symbol of Baratheon might. And yet, the house itself was fractured. Taking it would send a message. A declaration. A challenge. And it would be his. Aeron stood, his long coat billowing as he stepped forward. His eyes burned with purpose, gleaming like embers in the dark. I can take it now. The thought rolled through his mind like thunder. Secure these lands for myself. Storm's End is a strong keep. I'll weaken this dying house further, and gain an unshakable foothold in the Stormlands and Westeros as a whole. He exhaled, turning to face his army of shadows. Time to strike. The air crackled with unseen energy. His shadow soldiers stood, awaiting his command. The Dothraki wraiths, still mounted on their spectral horses, tightened their grips on their weapons. The Direfangs growled, their claws raking against the bloodstained floor. The shadow assassins lurked at the edges of the hall, shifting like phantoms. Aeron's violet eyes burned as he raised his hand. We march for Storm's End. But first. He raised a hand. Corpses lay scattered, lifeless. The fallen men of House Buckler, their faces frozen in fear. They had died defending their home, and now, it would become theirs once more. Arise. The world shuddered. A shadow rippled across the keep like a tide of darkness, stretching toward the fallen. The corpses twitched, shadows seeping from their very corpses. One by one, they rose, their eyes now black voids, their armor darker than the night. Before Aeron now kneeled the newest additions to his army. Once men of the Stormlands, once loyal to House Buckler, now his. The Shadow Monarch's legion had grown. Aeron's gaze shifted from his kneeling soldiers to the lone survivor still trembling before him. The man's breath was shallow, his face drained of all color. He had seen what should not be possible. He had survived what no man should. Aeron stepped toward him, slow, measured. The man flinched as those violet eyes, those unnatural, glowing eyes bore into him. You will ride to King's Landing. The man stiffened. My lord. Aeron tilted his head slightly, a smirk curling at the corner of his lips. You will report what happened here. You will tell them what you saw. Every detail. The survivor's lips parted, confusion flashing in his eyes. But, if they ask how I survived. Aeron's smirk deepened, though his gaze remained cold. You will tell them the absolute truth. The man's throat bobbed as he swallowed. The truth. He had been spared by something not of this world. He had seen men rise from death, transformed into dark, silent warriors. He had seen the fall of Bronzegate not by the hands of men, but by creatures of nightmare. He did not know if anyone in King's Landing would believe him. But he knew better than to disobey. Shakily, he bowed his head. As you command. Aeron waved a dismissive hand. Then go. The man did not hesitate. He turned, mounted his horse, and rode hard into the night, fleeing as though the stranger himself was at his back. Aeron watched him vanish into the darkness. His message would reach King's Landing. And when it did, they would know the name of the one who sent it. Their former king already died at the hands of something similar. Storm's End. The rhythmic gallop of hooves echoed across the damp earth, yet not a single sound came from the beast beneath Aeron. A shadow horse. Its body was an abyss of writhing darkness, silent as death itself. The only sign of life, if one could even call it that, was the cold mist that trailed from its nostrils as it carried him toward his next conquest. And there it was. Storm's End. The fortress stood defiant against the coastline, its impenetrable walls high and mighty. It was a stark contrast to the modest Bronzegate. This was a keep built to withstand the fury of both men and gods. From his vantage point, Aeron took in the banners fluttering in the ocean wind. Black and gold House Baratheon. Crimson and gold House Lannister. A reminder of a house that once ruled, and a house that stole the throne. His gaze sharpened. The castle may have appeared vulnerable, isolated in the Stormlands, but it was far from defenseless. Lannister soldiers dotted the walls, clad in crimson and steel, moving in formation. Even from this distance, Aeron could tell their numbers were greater than Bronzegate's forces. But he only chuckled. What are numbers against an undying army? His violet eyes gleamed in the dim light. They can't even harm me alone. A long sigh escaped him, as if the very idea of resistance was tedious. Storm's End was a mighty keep, but a keep is only as strong as those who defend it. Aeron opened his status window, his violet eyes scanning through the details with a hint of satisfaction. Aeron Grim. Job: Necromancer. Title: Kingslayer +5 Strength, +5 Agility, +5 Sense. Title: All-Knowing, Instantly Understand New Concepts, +50% Learning Speed, Automatically Identify Items, Creatures, and Magic. Level: 23 Right Pointing Arrow 40. Fatigue: 0. HP: 3200. MP: 3600. Strength: 60 Right Pointing Arrow 105 +5. Health: 42 Right Pointing Arrow 72. Agility: 41 Right Pointing Arrow 65 +5. Intelligence: 61 Right Pointing Arrow 80. Sense: 32 Right Pointing Arrow 65 +5. Available ability points: 51 Right Pointing Arrow 0. Passive skill. Tenacity, level 1. Skills. Ruler's authority. Perception plus 10 to sense when analyzing or strategizing. Job-specific skills. Shadow extraction 283 soldiers limit. Shadow exchange level 1. Monarch's domain. Unawakened skill. Inventory. Direfang's sword. Silverfangs. Aeron let out a small breath, feeling the surge of power course through his body as his newly allocated points settled into place. His fingers flexed around the handle of Direfang, the weight of the sword feeling even more natural now. His agility was enough to blur through battlefields. His shadows were limitless death incarnate. A slow, wicked grin stretched across his lips as his gaze lifted toward Storm's End. The Lannister banners fluttered mockingly in the wind, and Aeron found himself scoffing. Time to take this keep. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. Next chapter.